Hi, Drew. Thank you for joining me in this interview today. I'm looking forward to finding out more about you and about the process you took to write this book. Before we begin, can you tell us your name and the title of your book that we're going to be talking about, and maybe a little bit something about yourself?
Okay. My name is Michael Drew Mendelson, although I haven't gone with Michael for about 70 years, so I'm pretty much known by Drew. I'm a retired journalist. I retired about 3 years ago, so I'm now a full-time novelist and enjoying that immensely. Go ahead. What else should I tell you?
Okay, well, what book are we going to be talking about today?
Okay, the book today is called A Shepherd to Fools. This is a picture of the cover. The guy on the cover was me. That was actually me back in about 1970. So I was a little younger then, but that was fun. A Shepherd to Fools comes from a Rudyard Kipling poem called Epitaphs of War. And this is a short take on it, which goes, I was a shepherd to fools, causelessly bold or afraid. They would not abide by my rules, yet they escaped, for I stayed. And I love Rudyard Kipling, who was a powerful poet, wonderful writer, learned a lot from his works, and I wanted to quote him in this, and I really like that as a title. Just to give you a brief note, this is my second Vietnam War novel. I had decided from the beginning I was going to do a trilogy, do 3 novels. The first one was called Song Bateau. Song means river in Vietnamese, and Bateau was the name of the river. And that was based almost entirely on my experiences in Vietnam. This second novel, A Shepherd to Fools, takes place shortly after I actually, in reality, had left Vietnam. But it's an important story and one that I really wanted to tell. It comes right at the beginning of 1971 and deals with really 2 things. First on is Long Song 719, which was the last major battle that the South Vietnamese were involved in the far north of South Vietnam. And that one fell apart and caused the U.S. to realize that they had to get out of the war, that there was nothing good going on and nothing to be accomplished. And the second part of this novel is set about this same time and dealt with the fact that the United States knew there were a lot of American deserters who had left the war and who were hiding in Laos. And they were afraid that once the United States abandoned the war, that the deserters would tell the story of everything we did wrong in the war. And so they sent a Hatchet Team, which was a secret operations team, into Laos to capture or perhaps, if nothing else, kill these American deserters so that once the war was over, they wouldn't tell the story of what really happened. And that's about the last 150 pages of the novel and probably the focus of a lot of what people might be interested in. This, in fact, did happen. In 1970, the U.S. sent its first Hatchet Team in, and the team was hit by a much larger enemy force and had to run from Laos. And I thought, what would have happened if they tried again? What would have happened if they went back a second time to capture or kill these deserters? And that's pretty much what the last half of this book is about.
Well, thank you, Drew, for giving me a glimpse of what, the book was about. I'm sure all our readers would be really excited to learn more about your stories when you were in Vietnam. And, by the way, you chose a good picture of yourself. I didn't know that was a picture of you. But it's a really good picture. It matches the message that you're trying to share with people that want to read your book. So my next question is, how many books have you written? I know you already mentioned, the first book and the second book, so 2 out of the trilogy, but which is your favorite out of all the books that you've written?
Oh, wow. I first of all, let me say this novel is my 5th published novel. I published 2 of them way back in 1980 and thought I was going to be a full-time novelist, and found out that the money's not that great. You need to make a living. So I was doing both. The next 2, the first 2, one was called Pilgrimage, which was a science fiction novel, and the second one was called Marin 2120 AD, which was also science fiction, which I really loved from the beginning. But then I got back from Vietnam, and I started writing the first one, Song Bateau, and spent a fair amount of time working on that one, and decided that I wanted to write this as a trilogy. So I wrote Song Bateau, and then I wrote A Shepherd to Fools, which was the 4th novel. And about the same time, I was working with a good friend of mine, Barry Broad, who's a co-writer that I worked on with a different novel called Dark Sea Rising. There was another science fiction novel basically about intelligent octopuses that were discovered down at the very bottom of the ocean, and a oil company that goes to war with them, and it becomes a major issue there. That was sci-fi. And then I thought I was going to go back and after A Shepherd to Fools, write one more. So I'm currently writing the 3rd and final novel in the series, which is called Poke the Dragon, and is based on the idea that we didn't know whether there were nuclear weapons in Vietnam, but there was a lot of question about it. And so I took the answer as yes to see what would happen, and I've been writing that novel, so I'm about 140 pages into that. So that will be my 6th novel, and then we'll see where I go from there.
Nice. That's a lot of writing.
Yeah, I love it.
That's good. So, Drew, what's the significance of the title A Shepherd to Fools?
Well, A Shepherd to Fools basically was the story in Kipling's time of a man who was a guide to relatively unskilled soldiers and was leading them into battle and out of it. And he ended up finding them to be too crazy to actually lead anywhere and wanted to just give up. But he realized that if he left them alone, they would all be killed. So he stayed, in this character of his stayed, and the character saved the other troops, but he died as a result. So I thought that it was a pretty good description of the main character of this novel, who is a artillery captain, artillery officer, who at this point is a captain, who is asked to go with this Hatchet team to provide them artillery support, but also to be the kind of one of the intelligent, grounded people who would sort of keep them on mission. And he is not killed in the end of the book, and I'm maybe ought to leave it alone as to what actually happens, although I'm happy to talk about it. But he goes with them all the way into Laos, and the mission becomes something of a success because he stays with them rather than leave them. So I thought the parallels were worth enough that I liked the title and decided to keep it.
I love it. A lot of information there on just that title. So it's always a good thing to have, a good backstory as to why you choose a significant title. On A Shepherd to Fools, do you have a favorite character that you have written? If so, who and what makes them so special?
Well, the lead character is is an artillery officer, kind of with a lot of my own background, and the name of the character is David Weissman, who had worked in Vietnam with a artillery colonel, and he later becomes a general toward the end of this novel. And he's sent on all sorts of special missions because he's considered somebody who can be trusted to do on his own what he needs to do without a lot of direction. So he ends up getting assigned to work with the Hatchet team and go into Laos because of that.
Nice. And what was the highlight of writing this book?
Well, the highlight, I think, was there were two highlights. The first one was that I really wanted to imagine what it might have been like if I'd been there for a couple more months in Vietnam. Because right about the time that I was leaving, this mission to send the South Vietnamese army into the north, into Laos, to try to attack and beat the North Vietnamese was just getting put together, and I knew some of that was happening. But I left toward the end of 1970 before the mission actually took place. So I wanted to kind of imagine in my head what it might have been like to actually go on this mission. And so the book has a first part, and the first part is all about setting up the mission into Laos, or the mission into northern Laos against the North Vietnamese, and what that might have been like. And then we go into the second part, which is the Hatchet team. So that is kind of the two pieces of it. And I was fascinated by what was happening in the war, because a lot of people are very unfamiliar with the Vietnam War. It was not a popular war. It was not a war people supported or loved. It was kind of an ugly war, and ended up in kind of ignominiously with the United States leaving, and everything that we try to accomplish falling apart at the end. So that was a big issue that I really wanted to talk about.
All right. And what was the inspiration for this story?
The inspiration for this story was primarily I wanted to know what would have happened with the Hatchet team's move into Laos if that had actually taken place. What they would have done in order to try to catch the deserters who were known as long shadows. Long shadows was the term that was used by the Americans because the American deserters were mostly taller than the Vietnamese and cast longer shadows, so they were known as the long shadows. And that was the common term for them in Vietnam. They wanted to think about how that was going to work, whether or not that would succeed, and that was kind of my question as well. I found it very interesting to sort of speculate as to what this might be like. And I had read off enough about these two missions that had a pretty good idea of what went on.
I love it. I love hearing about your stories and everything here about, Vietnam. What was your journey like writing this book?
Oh, that was really a fascinating issue. I let me tell you a very brief history of mine. I had come to California back in the 1960s. I grew up in Kansas City, came here, and I went to UC Berkeley because I was going to be an astronomer, actually an astrophysicist. And I found out something. You've got to know a little math in order to be an astronomer. If you don't know any math, you're not going to succeed. And I found that out and ended up dropping out of school and getting drafted in order to help fill out the military. And because I had some college background, I ended up going to officer candidate school and becoming an officer. I didn't make it to captain. The day I left the Army was the day I would have been captain if I'd stayed in. So I ended as a first lieutenant and spent a year in Fort Lewis, Washington, and then spent 1969 to middle of 1970 in Vietnam. And I was just stunned, first of all, by how horrendous war actually is. I mean, you see war movies and other things, but unless you have experienced it, unless you've been there, you have no idea just how terrifying it can be. And you've got to kind of get your mindset to say, look, I'm going to survive. I'm going to get out of this. I will do what I need to do. I will follow the orders that I'm given, but I really need to make it in this war and come out alive. And that's what I kind of did. I realized that at the end of the war that I had lived a bit of a charmed life. I was never wounded. I was very close to a lot of big battles. I was in several really monumental battles that got a lot of people injured or killed, but somehow I survived, and I thought, this is a story I want to tell.
And I'm glad that you're here to tell that story, because based on what you were just describing, it wasn't an easy journey for you to get into it and then come out of it healthy and alive and being able to share with the world what your experience was. So thank you. So Drew, what inspired you to start writing? I know earlier we were talking about what inspired you to write this book, but to really start writing, like what was your inspiration to push you to do that?
Well, what inspired me to start writing was that after I left Vietnam and left the Army, I came back to California. And I realized that I had, because I had quit at Berkeley and because most of my credits were in astronomy, I needed to do something to learn something that would actually make me a living for the rest of my life. And I went to started over, and I went to the College of Marin in Marin County, California. And one of the classes I took, just because it kind of interested me, was journalism. And I met a professor, Betty Reese was her name, and she took me aside after I'd written a couple of assignments. She said, you're a really good writer, and I think you will become a fine journalist if you want to do it. Journalism is a great career, and you ought to go into it. And I took that to heart, ended up editing the campus newspaper, ended up moving back to the Midwest for a while, to Kansas City, to Lancaster, Missouri, which is a town of about 800 people, and became the editor of local papers, and really found that I loved writing. But I also found that I loved writing fiction as well, that fiction was a great hobby. I didn't expect to make a lot of money at it. I've done okay. I've sold a number of books and very comfortable with that. But I'm no J.K. Rowling. I haven't written Harry Potter and made billions out of it. I respect her work greatly, but that wasn't mine. And I have been writing steadily. I retired about 3 years ago and became just a full-time novelist. I'm writing the third book, as I said, of this trilogy, probably going to be the last of this, and then I'll move on from it, as I said, called Poke the Dragon. And that one is really interesting because I have to do a lot of research on the nuclear weapons and such. When I was in the Army, I was actually a nuclear weapons officer. And I don't think, I had a high-level security clearance, and I did a lot of that when I was in Fort Lewis, Washington. So I thought some of this is worthwhile to use as part of a story. So that's kind of where the story came from.
Got it. Thank you. And have you always wanted to be a writer?
Oh, I think I did, because I was actually doing a lot of writing when I was in high school, poetry and some short stories. They were not very good. I was a kid back then, but I knew that I wanted to learn how to write, and I figured, yeah, maybe I'll do a little bit of writing on the side. I never had anticipated that it was going to at some point be my full-time career, and I have enjoyed that immensely. But I think writing is, there's a number of writers in my family. My younger brother, Scott, is a writer. He's written a couple of sci-fi novels, and he's a retired psychiatrist who's written a lot about the field. My youngest son, Jacob, is a fine writer. He just graduated from law school and is going into the legal field. But I think he will as well do quite well as a novelist, even if it's just sort of his avocation. And I've got another cousin, Joel, who was a good writer. So I guess there was a lot of history in our family of that, and I am one of the products of that. So that's kind of where that came from.
Well, it's probably part of your DNA and you just didn't really know it. But 6 books after, and look at where you're at right now. So at least you're doing a good job, and I'm happy to be here to learn more about your writing skills and what it took for you to write Shepherd of Fools. Now, everyone gets criticism, right? Whether you're writing or not. But I'd like to know, how do you handle literary criticism?
Oh, I have thought about that a lot, because regardless of whether you are a skilled writer or an unskilled writer, you have kind of two sides that you have to deal with. You have to deal with the people that really like your work. And after I came back from Vietnam, I was at a number of military reunions, and sold my first novel, Song Bateau, to them, and it was really snapped up. They were all very interested in it. It was all about my history, and a lot of them had served with me, so they had much the same history, and it went very well. But I really wanted at that point to move on and to tell stories that were based upon research I had done and about issues that I thought were important to be raised. And it seemed to me that the Vietnam War, while it was not a popular war, was not well known among Americans. I think you could ask anybody my age and find out that unless they were in the war, they knew very little about it, and didn't know much about what the U.S.'s role in the war was, why it happened, what our reason was for going over there, which was basically originally to support the French. And then when the French left, we took it over, and it went on for quite a few years. It was actually one of our longer wars. Started our initial contact with the war was right at the end of World War II, when the U.S. sent advisors in to help the French deal with French Indochina, and lasted all the way into early 1970s. So that was quite a bit of a time for that war.
Okay, and you have a lot of experience in writing. So what advice would you give a new writer, someone just starting out?
Oh, I think that there are several things they need to do. First of all, they need to read a lot, so you know what's in the literature. If you're going to write something, it is good to know that you're not writing the fifth version of the same story that someone else has told, but you're writing something new and interesting and exciting. So you want to learn what is out there, and you also want to learn from good writers, from really excellent novelists who will show you how you can write well and learn what is the best way to write. And then the second thing you want to do is to learn what not to do, learn how not to be a good writer, learn, for instance, a novel that I'm still playing with that I haven't done much more, but I'm going to, deals in part with a writer who is in a writer's group with another friend, and this friend is not a very good writer. And in fact, at one point, he describes a meeting between him and this friend, and the friend who's actually writing the book writes all about how you have dinner with someone else and what you put on the table and what it tastes like and everything. And it is just page after page of things that have nothing to do with the story. And you really want to learn at what point do you stop writing about stuff that doesn't advance the plot, that doesn't tell more about the characters, that doesn't give you a better idea of the setting. If the story doesn't do that, it's not a good story. And if the story does do that, you don't need a whole bunch of junk aside from it to diverge from the main story and tell something that has no interest to people. So those are things that you really need to learn. And once you've done that, I think that you just write like crazy. Write as much as you can, spend as much as you can, time as you can doing it.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's good advice for someone that's really just starting out. Where can readers purchase your books?
Well, I am aware that they are available through Amazon.com, which you can buy it either as a hardback, and that was what I showed a bit ago when I pulled that up. Let me just pull this up, and I showed you the cover already, but this is just a hardback, and it's a fairly long book. It runs a bit over 430 pages, so it's fairly long. It also is available in paperback through Amazon, or you can get it through one of their Kindle books, which are books that you simply, you don't buy the book, you buy the content of the book and pay a reasonable amount and just download it onto your computer and read it. I'm aware that the book is available through a number of other bookstores, Barnes & Noble for one, and a lot of local bookstores, and you simply need to go in and order it through them, and they will get it and send it. This book is interesting because it is basically done as a book that is print on demand, which is sort of one of the newer systems for publishing, where you don't print like when I started out. You print a couple thousand copies and you distribute it to a lot of local bookstores, and people bought it or didn't. And in many cases, there were lots of books left over because nobody bought it. This is a much better system where they print a book when you order it. So you order from Amazon, and Amazon has a copy printed from the publisher of the book, and there are not a lot of copies left over. I think it's a much better way to do it, and not a lot of extra money spent or money wasted on it.
Got it. And if people want to find out more about you and your books, where would they go?
About my books, I again think that Amazon and some of the other publishers, some of the other booksellers will simply have copies available, and I would get one and read them. The only one that is not available is called Marin 2120 AD, because it was published in a newspaper. It was a serial in the Pacific Sun in Marin County, California, and was never reprinted as a single book. I've actually thought about going back at some point and putting it together as a single book and having it sold by Amazon or one of the others. But that is the only one that's not available. Pilgrimage was the first one. It was actually when I was going to graduate school at San Francisco State University studying creative writing and learning some more of the depth of the subject, how to do it. And it is available through Amazon. I mean, the publisher has not published many in a long time, so I think the book becomes more expensive. If people are interested, I would actually be happy to have a number of copies reprinted and have them available if people want to order it. And then you get it down into reasonable figures. I think I saw a copy for as high as $25 for a paperback that had somebody's notes in the margin. So it was interesting to see. But then the Vietnam War novels, I think there's I talk enough about myself in them that you get an idea of what my background is in the military, and I think that's where you would find out more of my personal history. I've had websites before, but I don't really find them that valuable for me, and there are a lot of extra work that I don't want to do. So I would be willing to do a website if somebody wanted to work with me on it, but probably nothing. So that's kind of where my background is. If you have any special issues that you want me to address, I'm happy to.
All right. Well, thank you. I think they'll find a good way of finding out more about you when they start reading your books. And lastly, Drew, how was your experience working with Bookmarc Alliance?
Well, Bookmarc Alliance, this is a, excuse me, fairly new relationship. It's only several months old. I had worked with another publisher recently that had done a good job, but then I got a call from one of the people at Bookmarc, and I thought that is actually interesting. I understood that they were a very skilled and capable company, and I wanted to see a little bit wider distribution of books and such than I had from the previous publisher. And I have had great talks with the representative that I'm working with at Bookmarc Alliance, and I have gotten really interesting discussions with them about where we go from here. There's a big book sale in Germany coming up shortly that I believe Frankfurt, I believe it is. Yeah, thank you. That's right, Frankfurt. And that is one that I had been interested in, but that was a little beyond my means at that point to get to. So I really was fascinated when Bookmarc wanted to do a online Zoom conference and have the opportunity for me to stay here in this country and talk about it. Hopefully, if I can sell a few more books, maybe the next year I'll go to the conference myself.
Well, thank you, Drew, for that feedback. And, we look forward to doing more in helping you advertise your books and have more people know about it. So I'm actually going to be part of the crew that's going to be going to Germany. So I'll get the privilege to talk about your book once we get there and hopefully help you more in doing what you want us to do with it. So thank you for taking the time today that, go through this interview with me, and it's been a pleasure, and you have a good day.
Okay, thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun.